Good morning. One of the most important topics in social casework is the social casework relationship. Please refer chapter 5 and 6 of your textbook for more on this topic. For the working with individuals course, the assignment is based on social casework relationship. There are 5 questions covered under this assignment. The first one is on social casework values. What are the core values and how do you evaluate yourself with regard to these values? The second question gauges your stress management techniques. One of the most important steps in managing a relationship is managing your stress or stress management. Only if we are stress free, we can pay more attention to relationships. We will talk about this more in the later slides. The third question asks you to assess yourself so that you develop more self-awareness. The Johari window needs to be used for this. Please read more on the Johari window and indicate at least 3 references under this question. Write the references in APA format. The fourth question is a follow-up of the previous 3 questions. By answering the previous questions, it is assumed that you have gained an understanding about your professional values. Now you have to prepare a plan for your professional development. The last question is on applying social casework theory in the casework reports. Since you've started your casework, just upload one of your casework session reports here. Make sure that you've listened to my video on casework reporting and incorporate theory into the report. Let us try to understand relationship in a little more depth. Relationship is a very popular term used everywhere. There are personal and professional relationships. Here we talk about professional relationships. In your textbook, please check out the difference between the professional and personal self. In chapter 5, there is also some material on the difference between personal and professional relationships. On page 45, there is a very important sentence which says, relationship is a channel of the entire casework process and it is the basis of all help. In fact, relationship is the most important medium through which all social work methods are practiced. Chapter 5 starts by defining relationship and describing its importance. Authors like Bierstedt, Perlman, and Richmond have defined or described the concept of relationship. Please learn at least one definition of relationship. Chapter 6 describes the principles of social casework relationship. Chapter 5 talks about the characteristics of the social casework relationship. There are 8 elements which have been listed here, which may seem very obvious to you and you may wonder why we even need a separate class on this. As we know, social casework or social work is a service profession. However, social work is also becoming a profession with very high demand, with many students opting for the course only to migrate or get well-paid jobs. Initially, when we used to admit students, we used to assess their service mentality or aptitude for the profession. But now, because the university admission process have changed, this is not very easy. Hence, it is hard for us to ensure that if a student has chosen this profession because they have the service value or attitude. Let us just remember this. The first 6 characteristics, especially the first 6 characteristics that you see on the slide, these are not optional characteristics. As a social worker, whether it's a social caseworker or a group worker or a community organizer, you have to mandatorily cultivate each of these characteristics. Let us try to understand each of these characteristics. These can also be considered as values. First, what exactly is concern for others? If you're a person who has concern for others, you see that people have problems and you want to help. You don't turn a blind eye to people with problems, or the first thought that comes to your mind is not, people are trying to use me. When someone asks you for help, you try to do your best so that you can help them. You understand the importance of mutual aid. Mutual aid means one person helping the other. You believe it is your responsibility as a human being to help, not a favor to the person you helped. The second characteristic is commitment. If you're a committed person or if you're committed to the cause, you do everything it takes. You just don't do what is convenient, or you just don't settle with what you can do, but you try to find out what more can be done outside your power so that duty is completed. You don't give excuses, you are accountable. If you can't do something after trying, you have to offer an explanation. A committed and obligated person does everything that is possible. For example, as a student, you may have 10 obligations. If you decide I can manage only 5 duties and you skip 5 duties, believing that you have an option, you are not committed. You have to do all 10 duties in the best possible way. If you do not have the skills, you also have the obligation to develop skills to do all 10. I don't have to tell you this, but when you say someone is committed, you say that because that person never gives up trying. Hope you got what commitment is. Remember, commitment is not an optional characteristic for a social worker. The next value is acceptance. Acceptance includes two elements. One, you respect the person because you believe that all people are worthy of respect, irrespective of what they are or what they have done. You are non-judgmental, that is, you do not categorize the person as good or bad. You are not biased. There are many social workers who are biased towards the client communities they serve. They may say that no matter what we do, it's useless. People won't change. Personally, I'm biased towards alcoholics because I have alcoholic members in my family. We need to explore our biases. That is, we need to be conscious of what our internal voice are saying about our clients. Externally, we may say things to satisfy them, but what is the real truth? What is our internal voice saying about the clients or how the client can change? That takes us to the second element of acceptance. We hold on strongly to the belief that people can change. Social workers are known as engineers of social change. So if we don't believe that people and situations can change, our profession becomes invalidated. So summing up the values that we've dealt with so far, we accept people with their strengths and weaknesses, and we believe that social work skills can be employed effectively to capitalize on strengths and minimize weaknesses. We are concerned about the client, whom we accept unconditionally, and we expect change, and we are committed to bringing change. Coming to the next value, which is empathy. Empathy is perhaps the single most important characteristic as well as technique of the social worker. Empathy has three elements. We need to listen to what people are saying, understand them, and then respond appropriately. The first three values we saw today, they are conveyed through non-verbal means, especially how we treat the clients and how we intervene with the clients. But empathy is primarily expressed through verbal means. Let me give you an example in a non-professional setting. If a child falls down during play and comes to you crying, the tendency for all of us to say is, Pote, Saramilla. It's okay, don't worry. You may be showing concern there, but you are not expressing empathy. To express empathy, you first listen to the words or emotional expressions of the client. Then you understand and respond appropriately. To express empathy to the child, you can say, oh, you fell down. It must have shocked you. Or it must have hurt badly for you to cry so much. We then give it some time to sink. We don't make any suggestions. We can just be with the client, ask it where it was hurt, massage the wound, and then ask, are you okay now? All this may take only a minute, but the child feels you've understood her pain and she goes on back to play. Likewise, when clients tell you their feelings, do not try to brush it away or minimize it or dish out advices. Just listen, understand what feeling she is trying to convey, and respond with words that reciprocate the same feeling. Do not mimic the same feeling, and your response should be appropriate, not more than what the client has said or less than what the client is trying to convey. Look at the example given here. Maria says, I get so mad because I can't do so many things I want to because of my disability. The caseworker responds by saying, it must be so frustrating not to be able to do things that you want to do. But remember here, note here that the caseworker does not stress the disability. The caseworker only stresses the feeling.
It just makes me feel really depressed.
And how do you feel about that?
Depressed.
And how do you feel about that?
Empathy Empathy is so important because feelings make up the largest part of any problem that you're dealing with. If you're able to express empathy, you can be assured that half of the problem is solved. I would like to bring humor to this topic by sharing with you a movie called Freaky Friday, where a teenage daughter and a mom are always fighting with each other. They experience empathy by shifting bodies by some magic. That is, the daughter is in the mother's body and the mother is in her daughter's body. The mother is a therapist. So after this body shifting happens, the daughter has to go to work and become the therapist. Her mother's advice to her was just say one thing, one sentence. How do you feel about that? Please watch this video which shows the situation. The next characteristic is authority or power. This is also related to the principle of self-determination. In the West, social caseworkers have a lot of power. They can use their power to take away children from families and place them in foster care. They also use their power to control allowances of people who are in probation or parole. In India, the situation is very different. Social worker has power only in situations where they have control over resources. For example, in cases where the social worker conducts socio-economic assessments or home studies as an adoption, the clients try to influence the social worker because they have the power to accept or reject an application. The social worker is supposed to make responsible and controlled use of authority and power so that the client's right to self-determination and their dignity is not affected. Let me share with you another movie. In the movie called The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, the social worker sexually abuses the client. The link of that particular video is given in the slide. Try to access it, or you can search for The Girl with Dragon Tattoo and social worker scene. Coming to the next important value or characteristic, which is genuineness and congruence. Let me try to describe congruence first. If you express on the outside what you are on the inside, that is, if you are feeling and behaving in the same frequency, you are a congruent person. Genuineness is basically the expression of congruence. Congruence is what is happening with the caseworker, and genuineness is the openness and realness the caseworker expresses to the client. When I was taking this class, your classmates Devika and Tony shared two incidents where they were not congruent. Devika said that she and her partner Arsha, I think, met with two children who were referred to them by DCPU. These children were so hyperactive and aggressive that our students couldn't handle them. They were repelled by the kids, while throughout they could not express what they were feeling. In the next incident shared by Tony, Tony said that during his house visits, he met a boy who was fully paralyzed who asked him, "Will you be with me?" Throughout the journey, on an impulse, Tony said, "Surely I will be there with you." But the boy confronted him by saying that he knew that this wasn't the truth. Tony then rephrased by saying, "I can connect you to resources and people who can provide sustainable support to you." I hope you got the situation. First, Tony said that he will be with the client throughout the client's difficult journey of paralysis, which actually Tony did not mean. He just said that to make the client feel better, but the client was able to sense the incongruence in the statement. When you're incongruent, you tend to say and behave in ways that you really don't mean inside you. During this discussion in class, we talked about if people can always be congruent or genuine. Congruence and genuineness do not develop overnight. That is something very important that you have to understand. Unlike the other characteristics, this is a characteristic that takes a lot of time to develop. It comes with experience, wisdom, and competence. Devika had said a specific phrase, "We couldn't handle the situation." If they were skilled in handling the situation, there would be no incongruence. Every social worker should develop congruence. Only then we can express genuineness. Just like empathy, expression of genuineness has a magical effect. Clients begin to trust us immediately. However, this is a characteristic which is perhaps the hardest to develop. Coming to the last two characteristics, when we deal with clients, we are not tabula rasa. Tabula rasa means a clean slate. We have our own past, prenatal history, our childhood, our upbringing, our stressors, needs, and problems. We should be extremely conscious of how our burdens, moods, likes, dislikes, biases, etc. come to the casework situation with the client. Rational elements refer to all those interactions with the client where we have consciously tried to assist the client, like in a professional casework relationship where there is purposeful and conscious use of values, skills, knowledge, etc. Whereas irrational elements are interactions and feelings that are not appropriate to the casework situation, that is, which are not required by that specific situation. For example, a caseworker who's very talkative person, in his casework practice, he often talks more than that is required, often interrupting the casework process as such. Likewise, a caseworker may be biased towards the LGBTQ community, and when a person from that community comes in as his or her case, he assesses them in a negative frame of mind. Again, there is an irrational element here. I believe you have already learned about transference and countertransference. This is also a situation where our unconscious elements come into the casework relationship. When the client's unconscious elements are projected to the caseworker, it becomes transference. And when the caseworker's unconscious is projected to the client, it is called countertransference. In transference, a client may feel her therapist is like a brother, father, or lover. In countertransference, the opposite happens. Transference and countertransference may be good or bad. It can be used as a tool to further casework goals if the caseworker is expert. Now we have come to an end of describing the characteristics of social casework relationship. Going to the question of how do we cultivate these characteristics, that's where the topic of your assignments come in. Just before giving you tips on how to achieve these characteristics, let us look at two more categories: principles of social casework relationship and core values of the social work profession as a whole. I believe Anne-Marie has already covered this topic for you. All I want you to see is that the characteristics I described so far are very closely related to both these categories. Individualization means that we should be conscious not to use a one-size-fits-all approach. We shouldn't compare one client with the other and blindly believe that what you did with one client can be applied to the other. Every situation should be treated individually. We need to be very open to variety and diversity and be flexible and adapt our interventions according to the situation. Second is purposeful expression of feelings. I explained everything about feelings to you when I talked about empathy. Remember that ventilation is a very powerful technique. As I said, if you deal with feelings, half the problem is solved. Third is controlled emotional involvement, which is also applied just like empathy. We have to be sensitive, then understand the emotions and feelings involved and respond appropriately. All this I've talked about when I talked about empathy. See how it is related. This explanation is only to help you understand how these categories are related. Principles 4 to 6, again, I've already explained them. And I'm sure you are acquainted with the principle of confidentiality, so I'm not talking much about it. These are the core values of social work as a profession propagated by NASW. You can see how these two are connected to the social casework relationship values that I've described so far. Just two things that you have to note is regarding competence and integrity. Competence is the key to enhancing commitment and congruence. If you noticed, a committed person is often very competent or is able to acquire competence. That is why that person can hang on to the end, exploring multiple options to resolve a problem. A congruent person also is a competent person. Competence means the acquisition of knowledge, values, and skills to apply to a particular situation. Integrity refers to truthfulness, honesty, diligence, and accountability. Often, one characteristic that students lack is accountability. Accountability means you are consistent with the duty and you are answerable for that duty. No one is in this world absolutely free. As much as we have rights, we have duties and responsibilities, whether it is as a child, parent, student, member of groups or society. We also shouldn't get to select which duties we should be accountable for. We should fulfill all our duties. If you are not accountable, people will stop trusting you. As a professional, people who are not accountable will lead to defaming the profession. We may be truthful, honest, and hardworking, but all this will reflect best only when we are accountable. So I believe accountability is the largest indicator of professional integrity. So remember, this slide teaches you to understand competence and integrity and practice them. We have seen the core values or characteristics of a social casework relationship. Coming to how we cultivate or develop these values. The key to developing these values is training yourself to direct these to yourself inside of you. For example, if you want to develop the value of acceptance towards others, let us first learn to accept ourselves. Let us say to ourselves, irrespective of what I am, I love myself. I do not judge myself as being good or bad. If you want to develop individualization towards others, try practicing self-individualization. Stop comparing yourself to others. Believe this, I am different. Hence, my experiences and the solutions for my problems are different. I have to keep trying till I find a solution for myself. Next, if you want to develop concern or show empathy towards others, first develop empathy towards yourself and take care of yourself. When you feel sad or angry, do not deny your feelings. Just accept your feelings and tell yourself. For example, I say to myself, Jasmine, you're sad, you're disappointed, you're alone, it's frustrating. Don't say to yourself all the time, Jasmine, you're okay, when you're not feeling okay. Empathize with yourself. Be kind with yourself first. If you want others to change, you try to intervene with yourself and bring about change in yourself. If you want congruence, genuineness, and commitment in a relationship, understand that it will not happen overnight. You have to develop confidence and competence first. You should be able to be open to anything and to be able to handle any situation or emotion. In short, if you apply these values and principles to yourself consistently, you will be slowly truthful and apply these to third parties. The first step to applying these values to yourselves is self-awareness or self-discovery, where you have a very clear view of your unconscious motives, strengths, and weaknesses. That is why I've given you this assignment. Then you have to develop self-autonomy. That is, your decision should not be influenced unconsciously by external forces. Once you have self-awareness, you tend to develop self-autonomy. You should be able to take decisions and interact as free individuals. When I say free, it is free from your unconscious motives or your weaknesses and giving focus on your strengths. Finally, to achieve personal and professional development, you have to plan for it and carry out the plan. Like I said, if you want to change others and plan and intervene with others in casework, let us first do it to ourselves. Stress management and time management are important skills that you have to master, because often stress and lack of time is the first factors that affect the acquisition of all other skills or values. I conclude this presentation by saying social work practice without values is like a body without soul. We have to consciously, purposely, and systematically try to acquire these values. The first step to changing others is changing yourself. Thank you. If you have any doubts, please post it in the comment section.